You would never run a production line without having some spare parts around, without having some preventative maintenance. You wouldn't not have any of that stuff and be surprised when it breaks down. And the reality is your people are the same. Welcome to The Fearless Foodie, the podcast that gets honest about what it really takes to thrive in food and retail. I'm Amy Wilkinson, coach, speaker and trusted partner to food industry teams with lived experience of the pace, pressure and politics that come with the job. Fearless Foodies cut through the fluff and get straight to what actually helps. And that's exactly what we're here to do. Let's dive in. I was running a session a few weeks ago with a leadership team in food manufacturing, and we often do like a one-word check-in at the start. What are you actually feeling? What's going on for you right now? And the words were things like tired, weary, deflated. One person said ground down and left it just there. And I didn't say anything for a moment because what do you say to that? And then I thought about it and I was like, actually, this is pretty much the exact same check-in that I've been getting from teams across the industry, no matter what the size of the business or the level of the people within the organisation, different sectors within food. We're getting the same answers each time. And that tells me that that is something I need to talk about today, because it's not just one company problem. It's an industry-wide problem. So this is the season finale of The Fearless Foodie. I am not going to wrap everything up in a tight little bow. What I'm going to do instead is talk about the stuff that is consistently showing up in my conversations with teams and with senior leaders. The stuff that's not making it into the trade press, the stuff that's not glossed up by PR people. But I really want us to have this conversation. And I really want you listening to think about what you need as an individual and what your business needs to do about it. Because the thing is, the pressure in the industry right now is real and it isn't going away anytime soon. We're seeing figures like business confidence among food manufacturers. It's just hit minus 64%, the lowest it's been since the energy crisis after the Ukraine conflict started. Mergers and acquisitions are reshaping entire organisations overnight. I'm seeing budgets frozen left, right and centre. And somewhere inside all of that, the people who keep this industry running are getting quietly ground down piece by piece. And that matters. This episode isn't going to be a complete rant. There will be a bit of ranting though. And it's not some wellbeing chat. I'm not going to tell you that you need to go and do yoga, although it would be a good idea. It's a frank look at what is actually happening in the industry, why it matters commercially as well as about the people, and what leaders can actually do about it, even when there is no budget, even right now. Let's get into it. I know that costs have risen and are rising from every single direction. So we're seeing ingredient costs go up, we're seeing energy pricing going up, we're seeing packaging, transport costs, labour costs. Like even when you look at, in isolation, the national insurance increase, national living wage rise in a 50-person food manufacturer, so it's quite a small business, that would mean that they are facing a cost increase of 100 grand on their annual payroll. For nothing, for not getting any more product out the door. What we're also seeing is the pressure is relentless in retail as well. There's conversations going on like government floating the idea of price caps, and margin is getting squeezed from both ends. And of course, there is conflict and war throughout the world that is piling stuff on top. So energy costs have started spiking again, supply chains are being disrupted, and prices of everything are increasing, particularly things like fertiliser. So we are seeing unprecedented cost pressures. And alongside that, we're seeing lots of mergers and acquisitions. So if I think about some of the businesses that I work with, you know, we've seen things like Greencore have bought Bakkavor, and they are quoting things like they're going to save around £80 million in cost synergies. There are jobs at risk across the industry, we keep seeing it in the press. And the language might be changing because it's like, oh, there's changing demand, there's cost synergies. But what we all know is what that actually means is people are losing their jobs and the remaining people are having to absorb the work. And what happens when there is so much pressure like there is at the moment, where there are mergers and acquisitions, takeovers, all of that stuff happening, the first people to go are often the best ones. So I've heard recently of some businesses where senior leaders that weren't the ones that they wanted to leave have decided to leave because they don't have the energy or the fight or the resilience left in them to spend another 18 months post restructure going through all the pain of, new ways of working, teams integrating. So they're just like, no, I'm getting out. And I get it. It's people protecting their careers, and they're right, because the problem is a business that is in constant change and constant flux can be really frustrating to work in. And what happens then is that we lose decades of knowledge by that person leaving the business, and particularly where we're not very good at recording data and keeping information. And the reality is now is that there isn't a revolving door of replacement people. The talent pool is not what it used to be. And I've talked about it in other episodes. I talked about it with Sarah from IGD. We're not attracting people into the industry as much, and people are leaving, and that is a real concern. The increasing number of people that I am seeing that are feeling a bit trapped in the organisation that they're in because the market's the way it is, they're unhappy or they want to get out, particularly where they're now being expected to do the job of 3 people, but they have been rewarded so much financially for staying, because that's how we, end up trying to retain people, is by giving them more money, where arguably I would say giving them more training, more coaching, more opportunities would be another better and cheaper way of doing it. But we throw money at people, and then you get to a point where it's really hard to move and really hard to leave that organisation, because when you're trying to walk into a similar role elsewhere, the job just doesn't pay what it needs to pay. But at the same time, they're not being given the experience or the development that they need to actually earn the title that they've been given or the salary band that they've been given. And that creates people that are trapped, which, from the outside, you might think, oh, that's a good thing because, it creates retention. But actually, if you have people in your organisation who are disengaged, they don't want to be there, they are checking out, they're just doing what they need to do to keep their job, but they're not going above and beyond, because people need to feel motivated. And with everything that is going on, it's hard, particularly because managers don't really have time to develop their people anymore, not because they don't want to, because they're already doing 2 people's jobs. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot of is that Gen Zers are coming into the industry and they're hitting the reality of food manufacturing and the white wellies and hairnets and the, running around chasing samples all day. And they're not necessarily getting the support that they need. They're getting this sink or swim thing going on. So they leave. They don't just leave the company, but they leave the industry altogether. There's more attractive industries out there. One of the things that I found really interesting recently was at Food Matters Live, we were talking about tech and how we're so far behind in the food industry, like 30 years behind things like car manufacturing and that sort of thing. And actually, if you're a young person and you come in and they're like, oh, go and find this thing on SharePoint, and then we're going to put it into an Excel document, and then you need to fill in this tracker and this, that and the other. And they're thinking, oh my God, there's so much better tech out there to do all of this stuff. Why are we doing it like this? It's not a good first impression for somebody coming into the industry. And we're doing a bit of a sink or swim. And there's been some recent stats that have come out that have said that 91% of UK adults are experiencing high or extreme levels of stress in the last year. I mean, that is ridiculous. And it's even higher for young people. So 25 to 34, 96%. And people are taking time off sick due to poor mental health and stress as well. So we can't ignore this stuff. We can't ignore the fact that we are trying to get people to do more with less. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot when it comes to MPD teams is this frustration where it doesn't feel like you work in a food team anymore. It feels like you work in a spreadsheet team, and that everything is about the numbers, everything is about the commercials, and we forget that we are making food that people are going to eat. But the reality is that that is what sustained cost pressure is doing to teams in the food industry. And a really personal frustration for me, and I think I put a post out on LinkedIn at the beginning of May about how things have been quite quiet in the world of fearless foodies. But anyway, people are still holding on to budgets, and I'm still having conversations every day where it's like, yep, you've absolutely nailed that proposal. You completely understand what it is that we need, but we can't do it right now. So there's capital freezes, there's project pauses, there's recruitment freezing, and it just creates this like kind of decision paralysis. Everything's in limbo, and it's really hard for people that are in those roles. And it's hard for people like me and people that are providing services to the food industry, because it has that ripple effect across everybody. So think of your data suppliers or your research people or your freelancers. The people that prop up the industry are feeling this more than ever because it all hits downstream. Let's just pause for a moment because I want to share something with you that might be quite useful. I've got something I need to say. The food industry is flipping brilliant, but it's also flipping hard sometimes. We ask a lot of people, tight timelines, constant change, making big decisions, lots of accountability. And sometimes we do that really early in people's careers. The question is, how do we support our teams to keep going through all these tough periods without burning them out? And that's exactly what we focus on in Fearless Resilience. It's a practical, evidence-led workshop designed for teams working in high-pressure environments. We look at how people actually respond to stress and give them tools to manage the pressure, stay clear-headed and perform at their best, while also protecting their well-being too. Because supporting people properly isn't just good for them, it's good for the business as well. And if you lead a team and this sounds relevant, you'll find details at fearlessfoodies.co.uk. And if you're listening and you're thinking, I'd really benefit from this, or the rest of the team would really benefit from this, send the details on to your manager. Right, let's get back to the episode. And if I hear the term, we'll pick that up once things have settled down. Things aren't going to settle down, and the reality is that it has a knock-on effect for the people in your team. So we're seeing teams that are being completely stretched. They're being expected to do more jobs than they were ever expected to before, post some restructure or other, but you're not giving them the tools or support that they need to do the work well. And I get it. I get that headcount needs to come down, but support people with the tools, with the behaviours, with the coaching that they need to therefore step up to the new roles that they are being given. Because your team will be getting frustrated that they have been having conversations in a performance review 6 months ago, but now the budget doesn't exist anymore. Your managers are being asked to deliver more with less, but they don't have an honest answer when their teams ask why. How do they handle that? If they don't have the skills to do that, it can be super hard and it can have a ripple effect across the whole team. And one thing that I'm really seeing is this kind of survivor's guilt when redundancies are happening, when colleagues are leaving and they're not being replaced. The people who stay carry both all of that workload, but also the emotional weight of what's happened. And they can't pour from an empty cup. And right now, a lot of people in this industry are running on empty. And I get it. I've worked in this food industry for the last 25 years and, we're not in business for fun. We are in business to make money. And businesses are focused on the visible cost lines. People in finance are saying, we cannot afford to spend any more money, the cash flow. I get it because it's going on in my own business too. But the reality is that the invisible costs are also building, because it ends up being people are making mistakes because they cannot juggle all the balls. Nobody knows who's supposed to be making decisions. So decisions slow down, customers aren't happy, opportunities are missed, and people are mentally checking out, even though they're still physically present in the organisation. And presenteeism actually costs more than people being off work, because someone turning up and performing at 60% costs a lot more than giving some people some proper headspace and some time off. And I obviously am passionate about this, but I actually think it's not just because it's nice to do and it's because it's good for your people and because it will make them happy. It's an actual commercial argument, because the UK hit 5 million working days lost to mental ill health in 2026. And that was by March alone. And despite 64% of organisations saying that they're taking steps to identify and reduce stress, only 50% think their efforts are actually working. So this isn't about, and this is when I look back on my burnout that I had nearly 15 years ago now, it wasn't because I wasn't doing yoga or all the things that your wellbeing, gurus might say. Believe me, I should have been doing those things too, but it was because I didn't have the skills to push back. It's because I had imposter syndrome. It was because I didn't know how to delegate effectively. It's because I didn't know how to manage the customer and to make sure that people were held accountable to do the things that they were going to say they were going to do. They were skills that were missing from me that led to me getting stressed and burnt out. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people to have those skills again. But I think it's because, I'm so passionate and love this industry so much. But what I'm really worried about is that the decisions that are being made right now to survive this cost environment are creating a bigger problem down the line, which is going to be much harder to solve in 18 months, 2 years' time. And I know that cutting L&D budgets and putting freezes on headcount are the first things to happen, but it's also the thing that's hardest to restart once it's been stopped. Because when you start deprioritising developing people through a difficult period, you signal to them that they're a cost to the business, not that they're an asset to the business, which they really are. And the average cost of replacing somebody at kind of mid-level in food is somewhere between 50 and 150% of their salary, because you've got to advertise, you've got to have agency fees, you've got to do onboarding, you're going to have a decrease in productivity while you replace them. But actually, if you just spent some money on developing those people, it would be a fraction of that cost. And I think businesses are making a calculation thinking that they're saving money, but the reality is that the cost is going to be further down the road. And the other thing that really worries me at the moment is when teams are in survival mode, it's really hard for them to innovate. So we've seen it recently where people are just reacting very short-termist to trends like GLP-1, we've just got to launch some smaller products, not really doing the real consumer insight work, tracing a trend because everybody's nervous and we've got to be reactive, and not really thinking longer term, not really thinking about what is going to move the dial, what's going to deliver that extra mile, because we're just so busy getting our head down and moving on to the next thing. Because real innovation actually requires a bit of headspace. It requires psychological safety. So people need to not think that if they say the wrong thing, they're going to lose their job in the next wave of redundancies. And people need to feel secure enough to say things like, I don't think this is a very good idea. Should we be doing something different? You don't get any of that stuff when your team is running on empty. And I think we are creating a talent crisis through this short-term thinking, and the bill will come in the future. So I promise I will stop ranting now, because it's not necessarily about having some sophisticated well-being program. It's actually about the behaviours of the people in your business. It's where leaders are honest with their teams, honest about what's happening, honest about what they do know, what they don't know, honest about what they can and what they can't commit to, not just fobbing people off, but being honest about it. People can tolerate a lot, and they can tolerate it even more when they trust the person that is leading them. What they can't tolerate is when they are being managed by a spin doctor who is just towing the line and telling them what they want to hear, but isn't ever delivering on it. And I think what I would like you as a listener to think about, and maybe have that conversation with somebody who is in a position of authority to do something about, is think about your people in the same way that you think about when you're running a production line. You would never run a production line without having some spare parts around, without having some preventative maintenance, or having people around them to help, the engineers around to help maintain that line. You wouldn't not have any of that stuff and be surprised when it breaks down. And the reality is your people are the same. Maintenance and developing your people isn't a luxury. It's what keeps the line running. So if you are a leader of a team right now and you have zero budget, be honest with your team. Tell them that. Tell them what's happening. Tell them what you do know, what you don't know, because I've talked about it before, and I talked about it when I did the episode all about restructures much earlier in the year. If you haven't listened to that, go and have a listen. Because when you are silent, people fill that with assumptions, and people usually assume the worst. They don't assume the best. And even if you don't have a budget, make sure you're still protecting time for people to have their personal development conversations. If that's internal mentoring, stretching them by giving them an assignment that's outside of their comfort zone, having honest feedback conversations, none of that costs money. And I think it's important as a leader that you do name the pressure that everyone's under at the moment. This is a really hard period, and I can see how hard you're working. So it's not always about only thanking people and rewarding people when something has been achieved. It is about thanking them and acknowledging the hard work that they are putting in now. And stop pretending things are fine if they're not, because people already know. And what they need is for you to know that they know. Because you don't need a budget to be honest. You don't need a budget to protect your people's dignity. But you do need to decide that those people matter. And if you're a leader, listen to this thinking, yes, how do I actually have these conversations? There are a multitude of Fearless Foodie and Over Food's Sake episodes where we talk about having difficult conversations. They're there for free. There's paid programs, of course. I have resilience workshops, one-day workshops that are really around the things that help people to get through those tough times. And it isn't all kind of yoga and meditation. It's actually neuroscience and understanding the practical ways in which you can be more resilient. I'm going to put some links in the show notes so that you can go and navigate and find those things. But also come and find me on LinkedIn as well, because I think we need to have more of this conversation. I'm always up for a conversation. This industry is hard. It's always been hard. I've always said that I love it and hate it in equal measure. But the people in it are exceptional. They're creative, they're committed, and they're genuinely passionate about making good food. The challenge what we've got right now is that the system is squeezing those people, and too many people and too many businesses are letting it happen without some pushback. So if you're in a position of leadership, you have more influence over this than you think. We can't fix the macro environment. We can't stop those wars and all of those pressures that are happening on the outside. But you can do things to protect your team inside that organisation, because that's worth fighting for. Season 4 is back in September. I will be sharing some episodes over the summer that I think will be really useful for you in this climate. If you've enjoyed this season, can I ask you a really quick favour? Can you go onto Apple Podcasts and leave a review? Because it genuinely helps the show reach more people who need it. Have a great summer, and I will see you on the flip side. Be bold, be brave, be fearless. That's a wrap on this episode of The Fearless Foodie. If it hit home, subscribe, leave a review and share it with someone who's ready for less fluff and more real talk. And if you're ready to build a bolder, braver, more brilliant team, come find me at fearlessfoodies.co.uk. Until next time, be bold, be brave, be fearless.